You know, when we look at those great paintings, the ones that sort of define a nation, we tend to think of them as, well, serene, right? Universally beloved masterpieces.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the real story, the one that actually drove change, it's so often a story of conflict.
Right.
The most revolutionary art, the pieces that eventually set the standard for future generations, they rarely started with quiet applause. I mean, they began as scandalous failures,
Evoking debates, censorship.
or in some cases, literally causing physical fights in the gallery halls. They challenged the very core of what society deemed decent, spiritual, or even real.
And that is exactly where we're going today. We've pulled together a fascinating stack of sources detailing how some of Russia's most iconic paintings, the absolute pillars of the world-famous Tretyakov gallery, were initially rejected masterpieces.
And for this deep dive, we're focusing on 4 distinct, really intense controversies from the 19th century. We're looking at what happens when an artist just rips away the safety net of tradition.
And crucially, how one man, the visionary collector Pavel Tretyakov, managed to acquire and preserve these works that society, the church, and even the Tsar tried to bury.
He wasn't just buying paintings he liked. He was, in a way, collecting controversy itself.
He was curating a set of societal challenges. So let's start with an artist who forced an entire nation to face a very uncomfortable truth about itself. Vasily Vereshchagin.
Vereshchagin is such a powerful starting point. Before his military service, his whole view of war was shaped by, the art of the time.
Galloping horses, parades, heroic glory, the standard stuff.
Exactly. But his time in Turkestan completely shattered that romantic illusion. The sources are so clear that witnessing the sheer barbarism, the physical suffering on all sides, it just transformed him.
So he comes back with a new mission.
A dedication to showing war for what it really was, a mechanism of indiscriminate suffering.
And when he exhibited his Turkestan paintings, first in Europe and then in Petersburg, the shock was palpable.
People were expecting victorious scenes. Instead, they got what he called a common world tragedy. They saw dying and wounded Russian soldiers. No parades, no glory.
And the reaction wasn't just critical, it was vicious.
Oh, absolutely. He was accused in the press of holding a dangerous Tashkent view, even of sympathizing with the Central Asians. And this rejection, combined with the trauma he'd already experienced, it drove him to a nervous breakdown.
Which leads to this incredible act of defiance. He was so distraught, so angry, that he burned 3 of his own canvases, the ones that had received the most furious attacks.
That act, it's the ultimate declaration of artistic independence. He was essentially telling the public, my vision dictates the truth of this art, not your fragile sensibilities.
It really speaks to his character, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, this is a man who refused all government orders and decorations.
Yeah.
The only one he accepted was the Order of St. George, which he earned for his bravery defending the Samarkand fortress.
His devotion was to honesty, not to the establishment.
And the culmination of this whole series, the one that really sticks in your mind, is the Apotheosis of War.
Initially, it was about the conqueror Tamerlane, right? But he expanded it.
He expanded it into something universal and chilling. I mean, you look at the visual details. This pyramid of human skulls on a desolate, scorched steppe. The trees are dried, crows are circling.
And what's so surprising is the color palette. It's not dark and gloomy.
No, it's bright. He intentionally used these rich, bright colors, these yellows, to practically emphasize the horror. It forces you to look at the brutality under the harsh light of day.
And the inscription he put on the frame just makes it timeless.
Dedicated to all great conquerors, past, present, and future. That takes it from a historical comment to a prophecy.
So this is where Tretyakov steps in. He sees the power in this, even with all the political risk.
And Vereshchagin, still refusing to compromise, insisted on selling the entire series as a single unit. In London, the paintings were cataloged as not for sale individually.
And Tretyakov took the plunge.
He acquired the whole controversial collection, with some financial help from his younger brother, Sergei, for the absolutely massive sum of 92,000 silver rubles.
92,000 rubles for art that was actively provoking the establishment? That is commitment.
There's a great quote from a letter he wrote to Tretyakov.
Right.
Vereshchagin says, "War is before me. I strike it without mercy. The strength of my blows is a question for my talent, but I strike it hard and without mercy."
Wow. He wasn't just painting, he was fighting a battle on canvas.
And Tretyakov was preserving that inconvenient truth for everyone to see.
So rejecting war was one thing, but how do you provoke that same level of outrage over something as sacred as faith? Let's move from physical conflict to theological confrontation with Nikolai Ge.
Ge is a fascinating case because his first big controversial work, The Last Supper, from 1863, was actually a success at first.
Right, the emperor bought it for a huge sum, 10,000 rubles, and it earned Ye a professorship.
But even with all that, it immediately polarized the intellectual and religious elite.
Why? What was so different about it?
Well, he fundamentally altered the familiar iconography. We're all used to that peaceful scene, right? Christ in the center, a long table, disciples neatly arranged.
It just threw that all out.
Completely. He turned it into a domestic drama. The figure of Judas, the betrayer, is pushed right up front, almost stumbling out of the light.
And that light is key, isn't it? There's the bright strip of light.
Exactly, and it's coming from a lamp behind Judas, physically separating him from Christ and the apostles. It's a brilliant dramatic device.
And this reflected his whole philosophy about Judas. He didn't see him as just greedy.
No, he saw Judas as this desperately brave man trying to stop a train, acting out of fear that the followers were heading for an abyss. A much more complex character.
And his depiction of Christ was also a problem?
A huge problem. He wasn't this powerful preacher. He was shown as a relaxed, almost common figure lying on a couch. Dostoevsky famously said of it, "Where are the 18 centuries of Christianity? Before us is an ordinary quarrel of very ordinary people."
They called it crude materialism, but that was Jer's whole point, wasn't it?
That was the point. By stripping away the sacredness, he was saying that betrayal and apostasy, these things can happen now or long ago, at any time, with each of us. It makes it immediate and personal.
So if that wasn't controversial enough, he comes back 25 years later with What is Truth? Christ and Pilate.
And this time, the reaction was instant and devastating.
Not just criticism. The Oberprocurator of the Holy Synod called it deeply anti-religious and offensive, and the censorship went right to the top.
Right to the Tsar. Alexander III looks at the canvas and literally writes in the margins. The painting is repulsive. Remove from the exhibition. Prohibit from exhibiting.
An imperial ban. So how did Tretyakov even get his hands on it?
Well, and think about the public disorder. The artist's wife recalled that the arguments in front of the painting would sometimes escalate into fights.
People were actually brawling over a painting.
They were, and the outrage was driven by the figures themselves. Critics refused to even call the figure on the left Christ. They called him some interlocutor, a convict with a malicious face, a malicious proletarian.
While Pilate is this strong, condensed figure, full of hidden energy.
And Ge deliberately violates artistic tradition.
Yeah.
He's not using light to mean good and dark to mean evil. He's just using light to intensify the psychological drama of their dialogue.
So Tretyakov, who was always cautious about the Tsar's anger, he hesitated.
He did, but this is where his network was so important. Leo Tolstoy, a huge moral voice at the time, strongly advised him to buy it. He called it a real pearl.
And he did, but he couldn't even display it.
No. He acquired it, protecting it from being destroyed, but he wrote in his diary that he would leave it until better times. He knew the public and the state just weren't ready.
That theme of challenging the status quo now moves from religion and war to, well, art itself. Well, this is a real surprise, a huge controversy over a landscape.
It seems impossible, doesn't it? Arkhip Kuindzhi's Birch Grove from 1879 managed to split an entire movement without any war, scripture, or scandal, just scenery.
So when it appeared at the 7th Traveling Exhibition, what happened?
The painter Ripon said everyone simply gasped. You have to remember the context. Kuindzhi was part of the Wanderers, the Protevizhniki, who were all about realism and social commentary.
But his work was different.
Very different. He wasn't a strict realist. He used a more decorative style, strong illusionism, and this unique handling of light. The critics said Kuindzhi managed to catch the light.
And the composition is so immersive.
It is. He pushes these huge birch trunks, which almost look like poplars, right up close to you so you feel like you're standing in a dark, damp, gloomy forest. Just steps from this blindingly bright, sunlit clearing.
He's capturing that transition from darkness to light, cold to warmth.
And if you look really closely, there are these amazing hidden details. A tiny animal, maybe a mouse, on a stump. Some people even see a human profile suggested in the distant branches.
It's an experience, not just a picture.
Exactly. But this radical style provoked powerful enemies inside his own movement. A really nasty anonymous article attacking his technique was published.
And it turned out to be written by a fellow artist.
A fellow wanderer and a famous landscape painter himself, Mikhail Klut.
So a landscape, a painting of a birch grove, was so revolutionary that it drove a senior artist to libel and helped break up a national art movement.
That's it, precisely. The conflict got so bitter that Kuindzhi chose to leave the Wanderers, even though Kramskoy, who we'll get to next, tried to persuade him to stay. Clot also had to leave in disgrace. A fight over how you apply paint became the catalyst for the later split of the whole movement.
Incredible. Our final story brings us back to Tretyakov's personal moral boundaries, and it involves Ivan Kramskoy, an artist Tretyakov knew and trusted completely.
He bought most of his work. They were close friends, business partners.
Which is why it's so remarkable that Tretyakov flat out refused to buy Kramskoy's most famous painting, the portrait of an unknown woman.
It's a huge rejection in his career as a collector. The painting didn't enter the Tretyakov gallery until 1925, decades after his death.
And the reason was a strict moral objection. It reflected Tretyakov's very orthodox views.
The woman in the portrait belonged to a social class known as the demi-monde, ladies of the half-light. She was likely someone's sodержанка, or mistress, and Tretyakov just found her seductive, teasing beauty to be completely unappealing.
The painting is basically a visual catalog of everything that was considered scandalous for 19th century society.
Every detail is a message. The sources point out she's riding in an open Landau carriage in the middle of the afternoon between 3 and 5 p.m., which was just not done.
Then the fashion.
The fashion is everything. High Parisian style, a hat a la Francis with these over-the-top ostrich feathers and pearls, and, importantly, no veil.
She's wearing a very tight coat, a la Skobelev, trimmed with sable fur and satin ribbons, thin Swedish gloves, gold bracelets.
Everything was too elaborate, too alluring, teasing, and too beautiful. It was a deliberate performance of her status outside polite society.
And that society just refused to respect her.
Oh, the critics piled on. The famous critics Dasov called her a coquette in a carriage. Others called her an offspring of the big city.
The irony is just so rich. The same society that celebrated imperial opulence refused to accept a woman outside their moral code could look so powerful.
But time, as it always does, rehabilitates the rejected. Today, we admire the incredible artistic quality, that expressive face, the masterful painting of those scandalous details.
The painting's name even evolved. The Stranger was influenced by a poem from the early 20th century.
And by Soviet times, it was completely reevaluated. It became known as the Russian Gioconda, a symbol of spirituality and aristocracy, a complete 180.
What an incredible journey through history, faith, war, and morality. We've seen paintings that caused nervous breakdowns, theological outrage, imperial censorship, literal gallery brawls.
And the breakup of national art movements.
And Tretyakov's collection, the Tretyakov Gallery, it stands today as a testament to the collector who saw enduring artistic value where society only saw repulsion or moral offense.
He didn't just collect what was popular, he collected the challenges.
The unifying theme is so clear. All these works force the audience to confront uncomfortable truths about war, faith, morality, and the very nature of art itself.
And we've seen how time completely changed the perception of Kramskoy's unknown woman, transforming her from a scandalous coquette into the revered Russian Gioconda.
Which raises an important question for you to think about. Given that history so often vindicates the truly challenging artist, how many masterpieces being created today are being dismissed, or maybe even actively suppressed, simply because they challenge our current assumptions of what is decent, spiritual, or true? Something powerful to consider until our next deep dive.